Hello everybody. In today's tutorial video, we're going to look at how to add the ability to send haptics to our controllers whenever we do something like grab or fire guns. I won't start with an intro video. I'm going to straight into code, starting with our input controller. Up here at the top, we have a few using statements we'll be needing to add: the system.link, a unityengine.input system, and unityengine.inputsystem.xr.haptics. Up where our variables are declared, I'm also declaring a property, public input device array called XR controllers with a public get private set. And then inside of our awake method, I'm calling populate XR controllers, which is a new method. I'm calling that right after populate default notified lists. And if we go and look at this method, you can see that it's a private void. It initializes our XR controllers property to a new input device array with 2 entries. And then we bind our input system.onDevice change to an anonymous lambda function that takes in a device and change parameter. And inside of that anonymous function, I'm performing a switch on that change. Specifically, I have the added, removed, reconnected, and disconnected changes that I'm listening for. You can check out Unity's documentation for the new input system for other input device change types. For the most part though, each one is just checking to see if that device usage contains either the left or right hand, making sure that we assign it to our XR controller's left or right hand entry, again casting that hand input .left or .right to an int and assigning the device. And removed, we're assigning it null just to make sure that it's removed. On reconnected, we do the same as added, and on disconnected, we do the same as removed. It's worth noting here that if you wanted to have the ability to pause your game or respond to the user losing a controller or a battery dying, you could set it up here in the disconnected or removed. The next change is down at the very bottom. I have a new send haptics public function. Takes in a hand input, an int channel, a float amplitude, and a float duration. It then checks to see if our XR controller at that hand isn't null. It generates a haptics request, which is from the input system.xr.haptics namespace, passing in the channel, amplitude, and duration, and then getting that controller at our hand input and executing that command. If for some reason the hand is null, then we also debug out a warning that we attempted to send haptics to the device and it wasn't there. The next thing we'll look at is a new class. It's in the VR namespace. So in our Solution Explorer, directly under the VR folder, it's our Haptics Impulse class. It's marked serializable so that it can be modified in the inspector. It's got 3 serialized fields: the int channel, float amplitude, and float duration. It has one method called execute that takes in the hand input, and all it does is send a message to the input controller instance to send haptics, passing in the parameters that it has as variables. This allows us to abstract away the input controller from whatever is actually wanting to execute an haptics command. This makes it a little bit more flexible, since anywhere that we have a public haptics impulse command in any class can just call execute as long as it can tell us what hand to execute it on, which we will see here in our haptics impulse grab feature. This is a new class as well, inherits from our grab feature. It has a serialized field for the haptics impulse, and on handle grabbed, it simply executes that haptics impulse, passing in our grabbables active grabber.hand. Our final new class is the haptics trigger. It's a simple mono behavior, also has a haptics impulse property. It has one public method called trigger haptics, taking in a hand input and executing the impulse on that hand. Where the grab feature responds to actually grabbing and executing a haptics impulse, the haptics trigger is a more general use that could be called from any other Unity event or can be referenced from any other class by using get component and calling trigger haptics. The last set of modifications we'll need to make is our projectile weapon feature. I've added a serialized field for a Unity event, hand input, on projectile fired. And down here in handle trigger triggered, after we create our projectile instance and fire it, I'm calling invoke on that projectile fired Unity event, passing in our active grabber's hand. And this is what allows the projectile weapon on firing to tell our haptics trigger to actually execute the impulse command that it has. So join me over in Unity in the editor and we'll take a look at how the scene's been modified. Okay, now that we're in the editor, we can take a look at our pistol And if I expand it out and I look at our primary grab point, you can see that I have this new Haptics impulse grab feature. I've gone ahead and plugged in some numbers that I feel are pretty good for a smaller object to grab. Amplitude of 0.2 and a duration of 1. It's worth noting that amplitude is going to be a 0 to 1 number, while duration can be anything from 0.001 to 20 seconds or 30 seconds. In my experience, smaller durations are typically better for quick actions such as the actual grab or firing of the gun. And speaking of firing the gun, over on the primary projectile feature, I've set up the on projectile fired to have an event that references this object, specifically calls haptics trigger.trigger haptics. And then the haptics trigger is got an impulse setup as well with slightly different numbers. You could tweak them to however you feel they should be. One benefit to doing it this way is in the future, if we ever add the ability to have alternate fires, then each firing mode could have its own haptics trigger, which would be really easy to set up to have the two firing modes actually feel different for the user. With that, we're actually done, so I'll jump into Unity. You won't be able to see it in the video, but I'll have some nice rumble through the controller. Let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, I'm now in Unity. If I reach over, grab the pistol, I had a nice little haptics when I actually reach my hand, and now every time that I fire, I get a nice little impulse. And then if I switch hands, left hand had an impulse, and now all the haptics are being sent to my left hand as I fire. And I think that'll wrap it up for today, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, please like. If you disliked it, dislike. Comment down below if you have any questions or suggestions for future videos. I've also got a Discord set up now, which link will be in the description. And have a great day.